Any second questions? Ms. Brooks?
Thank you. So, my concern is that employers are now driving the train of education where the focus should be on academics. I see that it started a little earlier now in 8th grade, selecting a path. So I see your key priorities and strategies. Strategy 1.3, expand opportunities for work-based learning experiences by accelerating the development of high-quality work-based learning experiences. This is a very accelerated program. There's a lot of work-based CTE courses. My concern is, again, does this take the focus off of academics, what we are here to do to ensure that students are learning how to read proficiently, write proficiently, do math proficiently, and with American civics, of course. And where does this lay? Where is the fine balance? Because this seems like it could overshadow the core purpose for academic education.
I'm uncertain as to what you're reading from over
Oh,
there.
it's the triage, it's linking education and workforce.
Got it.
Sure.
Well, that's one component of what we're working on. I think we take as a fundamental that you're going to learn core academic subjects that you need to know. Reading, the ability to write, ability to do mathematics. Everything kind of starts there. I don't think none of our discussions have been predicated on the idea that somehow these work-based education opportunities would supplant those in any way. And I would agree with that. I think that's kind of the core of where we start, and then we start building around those your ability to do something that you're interested in or something that will earn you a living. I don't think you can get away from core academic education and expect to have a successful workforce. Those things have to happen, and then I think we need to take the opportunity to help people build out some career credentials that help them put into action those academic things that they've learned so they can put that practicum into place so they can be effective in the workforce.
Been an interesting observation of the focus on workforce training. And by the way, my name's Lynn Davenport. I'm a public school parent. My kids went through Richardson ISD. But the last 12 years, I have been serving as a volunteer as a career coach for unemployed people. And so I've seen over the last decade, because of the shift away from academics in our K-12 system to more workforce training, that they're actually coming out and trying to enter the workforce, and they're having to be remediated. So they don't have the basic communication skills. They don't have the basic writing skills, math skills, and the STEM crisis can be attributed to the lack of basic math skills. So in listening to the gentleman speak, I appreciate your comments and your questions, Ms. Brooks, because yes, they are supplanting academic knowledge with workforce training. And it's ironic that you all are tasked with being a state board, the state board representatives focus on K-12 academics, and yet we're talking about what the whims of the corporations are and what we're wanting to be for them. And I think it's important for us to go back, focus on reading, writing, math, and science and the basics so that they are prepared. And in high school, then you can talk about things like workforce training, which is something that I did for education when I was a senior in high school. But I was taught how to write, and I was taught how to communicate, and so I was prepared for the workforce. So I think, I want to leave you with an excellent quote by C.S. Lewis. He said, "If education is beaten by training, civilization dies." He writes, "For the lesson of history is that civilization is a rarity, attained with difficulty and easily lost. It is the liberal arts, not vocational training, that preserves civilization by producing reasonable men and women and responsible citizens."
My name is Meg Bakich, and to echo what they've said, Texas is failing our students, and it's a luxury to sit here and waste the State Board of Education's time on workforce development when Texas is in a state of crisis with our children not being able to read, write, and do math. The founders of the United States were classically educated. They used their exceptional foundation in world history and persuasive writing to create the greatest country the world has ever known. They advocated for a system of public education, not to create a future-ready workforce as a pipeline to global corporations, But because they knew that a republic of the people, by the people, and for the people requires a citizenry who understands what led them to this position of freedom and now prosperity and why. Article 7 of the Texas Constitution makes clear that the purpose of education is to ensure generational freedom. The Constitution states the purpose is a general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of liberties and rights of the people. It shall be the duty of the legislature and the state to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public schools. It's failing right now. Classical education systematically addresses this mission through a thoughtful progression of the 7 liberal arts. The result is a child who understands his or her place in history and possesses the foundational knowledge to excel in college and pursue any path in life, free will. That same foundational knowledge enabling classically educated children to perform at a high level relative to their peers in college will also help them excel in their career of choice. Employers look for prospective employees who present an ability to consume a lot of information, reading and comprehension, draw conclusions from the information, logic, communicate those conclusions effectively, writing, and employ foundational skills in math. From there, employers can teach them the details of their industry. Can I have one more minute? And train them on the latest tools. Young people who lack such foundational knowledge and skills but have had some training in an educational bureaucrat's best guess of the vocational skills that will be relevant years in the future will struggle. And
Okay. What we're going to do at this point, we'll have all the testifiers please come up and we'll ask if there's any questions from members. So are there any questions for this group? I got Mr. Francis, Ms. Pickering, Ms. Hardy. So please have the testifiers come up to the microphone. Mr. Francis?
Ms. Bakich, I'm going to let you extend your testimony, but first, question for both you and Ms.
We're having trouble hearing you all.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I couldn't hear Evelyn, I couldn't hear you very well. Yeah, I don't know if it's your mics or what. Sorry.
Maybe I'm just too far. How was that? It's better?
A little bit better.
Okay. All right. Let me get closer to the mic. I was saying I wanted to allow Ms. Bakich to finish her testimony, but and the question is for both Ms. Bakich and Ms. Davenport, and maybe if you could kind of work to answer the question so we're not overlapping. But I want to understand because when another part of this board's responsibility is we're the state board for career and technology education, and I think the presentation was very appropriate. But are you saying that when I hear sort of like a blanket statement on things that we should and shouldn't do with our time here, and I do agree with classical education. I was classically educated, but are you saying that we can't focus on something else, or we have to be doing one thing at a time?
Okay. Should I finish my testimony first, or do you want me to answer your question? Okay. I'll make it quick. I was finishing it, but had some training in an educational bureaucrat's best guess of the vocational skills that will be relevant relevant years in the future will struggle. Classical education passes the wisdom and knowledge of one generation to another, literally a cultural transmission. Classical education enables children to join the great conversation of civilization, which means reading great books, influential essays, and beautiful poetry. There's no experimentation that's happening right now in our classrooms with technology and with career training. While classical has taken on so many forms over its more than 2,000 years of development, the fundamental essence of classical is faithful adherence to what is proven, excellent, and lasting. In other words, a classical educator does not experiment on children with trendy methods and materials when there is not enough time in the day to impart all the knowledge and wisdom we know will be relevant 100 years from now. We need to remove technology from the classroom. It's a proven failure. There's no such thing as virtual learning. It's an oxymoron. And the only thing that virtual learning does is it creates a singular outcome. It nudges a child to one specific behavioral outcome. It has nothing to do with academics. And it's being used starting in our youngest grades, to track and sort children for the workforce. This is the antithesis of what our founders created when they formed this country, for us to be free.
And I will answer your question to Mr. Francis, that workforce training and education and academics need not be mutually exclusive. So I'm not saying you throw it out altogether. It's that when the focus shifts away from academics to workforce and the needs of the corporation, then we lose sight of our primary role, which is to educate and give the foundational building blocks that lead to a better workforce. So that's why I said in the older grades, I believe you can do both as long as you have done the foundation. And at least in my district in Richardson ISD, I know that they are focusing on partnering with the medical center, for example. And so they're training kids to be phlebotomists. Well, what happens when a robot replaces them in the future? And that's all they know, because they've been in this workforce training model, and they're not getting what we got when we were in school, that more classical, traditional academic foundation. And you'll see that the private schools aren't doing workforce training. They're training, or they're educating the kids so that they come out and they can do any job. I could pivot. I was a recruiter. I could go and be, whatever I wanted to be, and shift gears. And you could do multiple careers throughout your life if you were educated. Then you understand what you need to do to learn the next industry, or whatever the hot industry is. And so much of what they learn in the schools, that's not even going to be relevant. And all this talk about certifications and credentialing and micro-credentialing, I think that's actually narrowing. I think Mrs. Brooks, you kind of spoke to this. It's training a narrowly skilled, cheap labor force.
Well, and I would add, and also to your question, is that, K through, right now in Texas, we make our 8th graders choose their career path. I mean, when I was in college, I changed my major multiple times. And then once I graduated, what I thought I was going to be, I didn't end up being what I thought I wanted, but I had foundational knowledge, and that's something no one can ever take away from you. You can train an academically educated mind to do anything. And I think it was Mr. Maynard who asked that why aren't the school districts more connected to employers? And I thought to myself, why would a school district be connected to employers? Our children are not human capital for the workforce. As a parent of 5 children who went through the public school system, when I sent my children to school, it was to learn to read and write and to do math so that they could be free thinking citizens, so that they could go choose their own path in life. The school district has no business talking to employers. That's not their role. And what's happened here in the state of Texas is in 2008, the new vision for public education, the Visioning Institute, was created. And then in 2013, what the Texas Association of School Administrators created a vision. And the vision was to reimagine education in the state of Texas. And what has happened is education shifted away from an academic education of equal opportunity to an education of equity based on teaching children values, attitudes, beliefs, and world views and behaviors. And it did this by pushing in technology. And we see this in our TEKS. We see this in Chapter 120 in TEKS that demands or mandates that our school districts are teaching character traits, government character traits, and now scoring government character traits on an online star. So I'm a public education advocate. I advocate for our state board. I see that our state board the legislation is slowly pulling power away from our state board and giving it to an appointed commissioner that we as parents don't want. And what we're looking for is for our state board to come in and wrestle back the representative government that we should have and return our classrooms back to an academic education. That would mean we're not teaching TEKS Chapter 120 character traits. That's unconstitutional to teach government character traits and then score them. And then all of our little kindergartners have QR codes and they have a digital footprint with a social credit score in the state of Texas happening today. That's wrong. And it needs to be fought. It needs to be fought in our legislation. It needs to be fought from our TEA. The other thing that needs to happen is our state board needs to come back and remove the computer teaks from K
Ma'am, I
through
think
8.
we've moved
'cause
away
it's
from the
failing our
question
students.
into general ideas of what the state board is. So do you have a follow-up question, Mr.
It's
Francis?
not a general idea of what the state board is. You are our representative government.
Mr. Francis, do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, ladies. That we all, thanks.
Okay, did I have someone over here? Ms. Childs?
Thank you for coming to speak today. I love this because I do disagree, but I think this will be healthy dialogue. I live in central Houston, Texas, where a lot of the high school students are already working, right? So considering that, should they not get workforce development training prior to them working if they're already working while they're in school?
Well,
Wait, what do you mean they're already working? Like they go to school and then they
Like
go
a
to
work-
work?
That's correct.
Ms. Childs,
Like
who
they
are you
go to-
directing the question to?
I'm to the woman in the pink.
Okay, so you're saying that, like when I was in high school, I worked. I went to school and then I worked for money. Is that what you're asking?
That's correct.
So your question is.
Because your
should-
commentary was that workforce development training should be completely pulled from the TEKS and from the
did
curriculum,
she say
correct?
that? I don't think she said that.
Okay, well,
Ms.
can
Dav-
you,
But
The-
can you restate
Ms.
what you
Childs
said
is
regarding
asking
the
her the
workforce,
question.
the workforce training?
people make you pick either or, and that's not what we're saying. We're saying that if we were focused on academics instead of workforce, we would actually have children. So like I ran for a seat on the Dallas College Board. At the community college level, the kids are having to be remediated when they come out of Dallas ISD and Richardson ISD because they don't have the basic skills and knowledge, okay? So then the community college, instead of giving them a community college stepping stone academic education, they're having to remediate them because maybe they were in some sort of workforce training model. I know with the early college high schools, 9 through 12, a lot of that is geared towards the workforce. It's not actually academic in the basis of it.
And another thing that came to my attention was Microsoft Office. So a lot of high-level jobs require the use of the knowledge of Microsoft Office. And if we take technology out, how are we preparing the students?
Okay, so
for their careers?
okay, so I'm understanding your question. You're
Yeah.
saying, so my answer to that is, your question kind of answers itself. If I'm a student and I go to high school and then I go to my job is going to train me. That is my workforce development. That's how I learn. As far as Microsoft Office and the that children need to be on technology in order to be able to do those things. You know, my oldest in 2015 was one of the first students to, when everything shifted to technology. And, he graduated in 2015. So he was in high school, and then I had younger ones who started on this technology. And at the time, they sold it to parents like myself as, oh, a
Innovative.
child needs this technology in order to,
Innovation.
it's innovative in order to be able to use the technology. Well, I mean, fast forward to today, we all know that the technology is made for a 2-year-old to be able to work. If you know how to read and you know how to write and you know how to do math, you can sit down with the training program and you can learn Microsoft Office like that. My dad's 87 and he uses Microsoft Office, and he didn't need to be trained in it in school, which would, because you have to realize when you're training them during those hours, they're missing out on academics because there's only so much time in the day.
I'm just curious because he stated that 36% of the jobs in Texas require a degree. What about the other 60% that require some sort of certification or some extended knowledge on a particular craft? Because I was also classically trained. I have a liberal arts degree, but I remember graduating during the recession and nobody would hire me because I didn't have specialized certifications that we're offering to high school students. So I'm asking, how do you circumvent that if we make everything solely based on academics?
Well, if you're, so when, like you said, you've got high schoolers who then go and get work after 3 o'clock, they go and work. And, you know, once you hit high school, like when you're a junior and senior, if you want to take a wood shop class or an electrical class or a computer class, you can do those things. And, you know, if you want to, once you graduate, you decide, you know what, I want to go to college, or you know what, I want to go be a plumber, or I want to go to electrician school. Those are your free choices that you can make based on the knowledge that you have from reading lots of books, writing a lot, your ability to articulate. All of those things are necessary to make the decisions to go. And like I said, you can train any academically educated mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Bakich, am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Bakich, I have a question for you, building off of what Member Childs has said. A lot of our children in socioeconomic disadvantaged households enjoy the benefit of earning a college or a career-ready certificate while in high school. So is it your request that those children not have that option? And then whenever they graduate high school, then they have to pay for that college-ready certificate, which they may not be able to do, or delay their right to earn a living for their family?
So what I would say is that if we are, those children that are socioeconomically disadvantaged are the ones we are harming the most by
It's the
not
narrow
academically
skills.
educating them.
Excuse me, Ms. Bakich, only, my question is to her, her answer is to me. Thank you.
And so those children are the ones that are being harmed the most, and they're being treated as human capital. And how it used to be prior to, them receiving these certificates is they would go to school, they would graduate, and a company trains them. They're not paying for it. They go get hired to be an electrician, and that company pays them. Or, the plumbing, they pay for the training. What's happened is corporations now are using our schools as training grounds I actually sat in with, it was Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, it was the P-Tech schools and DISD with Marath, and it was a luncheon, and I was so amazed because American Airlines and Southwest Airlines said, we will tell you what we need for our company, what jobs are open, and then we will use our P-Tech schools to train the students for it. And I
Now,
thought,
we're getting off topic now.
well,
So
we're
your
not.
answer- so
We're
your
not.
answer is that yes, socioeconomic children, poor children, should have to seek that workforce certificate after graduation.
my answer is the best thing that you can do, that we can do for our socioeconomically challenged students
Educate
is to
them.
teach them to read, write, and do math, because then they can be whatever.
I think I've got Ms. Hardy, Dr. Ortega, Mr. Maynard, and then Ms. Brooks.
First of all, Lynn, you left out social studies as an important part of the
Yes, I
core.
did.
Your name's Mud.
I didn't have enough time. 2 minutes isn't very long.
Sure,
I could
sure.
go on and on. Yeah.
No, I've heard the governor leave it off and everybody else
Yeah.
too, so. But one of the things that I want to kind of grasp I agree with the fact that we are almost skimming over the fact that our students are not getting a good foundation. And ideally, we should have the kids in K through 8 to be able to have that foundational stuff. When you talk about the founding fathers, many of them did not have classical educations in the sense that they went on to the universities and all that sort of stuff. They were just at the age of 14 or 15, 13 or 14, they were able to read, write, and think in a way that prepared them for life.
They didn't have iPads either.
I think that you are correct in saying that we need to have more fidelity with the lower grade levels, because we are skimming over and so many things are not taught. And I think, it seems to me like social studies is one that they always say we never have time to teach it, that I learned it in school, but what is it that's supplanting that? And this is what you're saying, a lot of these other things are coming in. But I also think that there's value in, when the gentleman was talking about the workforce, the fact is there are a lot of kids who need the skill training, and they get exposed to it in high school, which gives them an idea of what pathway or direction they want to go. And I see that as an important role here at the State Board of Education. But I do see the fact that before they head out on that trail, because I am looking at people who are supposedly college graduates who cannot write a decent sentence, cannot explain what they've heard in a lecture, and that sort of thing. And that tells me we're not really getting to those skills that people need, life skills for.
Yes, and
Before
I think that
workforce.
you're,
Ms. Hardy, is there a question
you're
in there?
absolutely,
I know.
Yes, I
already
agree with
fussed
you.
at her.
and.
I
but
just wanna say if
we're
that's
not
what they're
saying
going
that
for.
you have to throw it out completely. It's that we have an imbalance, and so we need to bring it, especially in K through 8, as you had mentioned. And then I also said about the technology. So in K through 8, we have a real problem with screen addiction, and the kids, we have the proof that the technology is not working when Texas is in the bottom quartile. So I think we could examine what has changed the most, and I would say that is it. And she talked about her district adopting the TASA vision. Mine did too. Her former superintendent actually led the TASA vision. And you look now, fast forward, you can see the proof is in the pudding. The kids aren't where they need to be. So yeah, I'd love to see a focus on K through 8, get the technology out, and we have the evidence to show that it's not working.
Any follow-ups, Ms. Hardy?
That's all.
Dr. Ortega?
My question is for Jan. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jan, okay, pink. So that means you are Lynn?
Oh, I thought you said
Who's in the
Jan.
pink?
Meg.
Meg, okay, thank you so much. Meg, you mentioned that, that the kids need to be reading, writing, and doing math. Are you saying that preparing them for the workforce is not teaching them that? Are they not learning reading?
No, in K through 8, children are not learning to read well, they're not learning to write well. They don't write, literally cannot write their names. They don't have a signature.
But what I'm asking is the curriculum for workforce development. Are you saying that it's not in the curriculum for them to learn reading, writing, and math?
What I'm saying is that our curriculum has shifted. It has shifted to soft skills. It has shifted to behavioral, and it's been done via technology. And there is not an emphasis on teaching children. Like, for one thing, the online STAR, right? We piloted it this year. Next year, it's mandated. So every school district has their children, kindergartners, on computers the majority of the day to teach them, to train them on how to take an online test. That's not right.
But do you think that's a local thing, or,
No,
I mean, that's not.
that is a
something-
statewide problem.
And federal.
The online STAR is a statewide problem. Districts don't want it, but they're being told that they're mandated. So now all these, and it's an unfunded mandate because, right, it takes technology to administer the test. But we've got kindergartners now, the teacher's sole focus is, well, they have to be on the computer so they learn how to take an online test. So yes, it is supplanting true academics.
Okay. I think you still didn't answer my question about the reading, writing, and math not being in the curriculum for workforce development. So I guess my other question then is, there is
I'm not sure what you're
extensive
asking me.
research. I'm asking, you mentioned that the students are not reading, writing, and doing math if they're doing workforce development lessons. And so what I'm asking is, do you have any kind of, have you looked at the curriculum? Does it say that they're not doing any reading, writing, or math?
I'm looking at the results, and Texas is failing our students. They can't read, they can't write.
So
they
you're
can't
making the
do
assumption
math.
that that is due
And
to workforce
the problem
development?
is, there's been too much time shifted away in the classroom to making just certain children are trained on technology.
Do you
and
have
are
any
being
data to
tracked and
support that?
sorted for the workforce.
Do you have any data or research, scholarly research that supports that? Because everything that I see is a lot of positive reasons to have workforce development in society. So I'm
Yes,
curious
I can
if
send you
you've seen
plenty
any,
of data showing that Texas is failing its students in
but
reading, writing, and
because,
math.
specifically because of the workforce development?
Yes, because Texas has shifted through TOS's vision to reimagine education away from one of academics to one of training. And it started with in 8th grade, there was something passed, I can't remember what bill it was, that said children have to choose what their, career path is. That was starting in 8th grade. It's been a complete shift in our classrooms away from academics.
I would love to see the research. So if you could send it to me, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Maynard?
I'll just preface it, is that, my background is in high school CTE. So are you familiar with the manual education movement in the late 1800s? Any of you?
The manual education movement? No.
You mean like labor? Talking about labor?
Manual?
It
A
was,
book? A manual?
it was the precursor to vocational education. And I think it's important to note that, because is that one thing that the people that started that were very clear about is that it was never intended to supplant what you're talking about. Never. It was intended to be in addition to. And so when we're talking about employers and things like that, this is that, we're not wanting different things. Okay, and I'm speaking as someone who spent a lot of time in the classroom, who had kids that came to my class who couldn't do fractions.
Yeah.
I taught them how to do fractions.
I know, I believe it.
I taught them how to do fractions because we did those things in the context of an application. And when those kids saw that in the context of an application, they understood it. Do y'all know where the highest level of reading is in any high school?
No, but I have a guess.
Yeah, it's in the CTE. You ever read an automotive manual? Or the level of math it takes to do that? And so, I think what I would just caution you is be careful, because I will tell you that when CTE is done properly, it does everything that you're advocating for. When it's done properly.
But it's not.
When it's done properly.
Okay, so I listened to your commissioner state, he agrees with you, that workforce development should never supplant academics. And
Yep.
I'm here to tell you,
It's here to support it.
I'm here to tell you, as a mother of 5 children who have gone through the public school system, who has been solely focused on traditional public education in the state of Texas, academics have been completely supplanted by a workforce development and behavioral training in classrooms. And if you guys, all you have, the proof is in the pudding. Our children are not learning, they're not reading well, they're not writing well, they're not doing math. Something has to change. And I think you should listen to parents who have children in the system to say, hey, here's what's happening in the classroom all day. Like when I tell you that kindergartners are being put on computers in order to be trained to take an online STAR, there's no academic education going on there. Now, whether that has to do with workforce development.
I don't disagree with you on that, by the way.
Right, so if that has to do with workforce development or not, it's failing our students. And we need to get back to what's been tried and proven successful and stop trying all these new bells and whistles and methods. We used to be able to educate our students. We need to go back to what used to work.
By the way, have you all ever seen the research on handwriting and the academic value of handwriting?
Yes, and what
yes.
it does for dyslexic children especially, yeah,
And the connection to
absolutely.
the brain and the memory.
Yeah.
And it's a day lesson rather than an ongoing thing that is embedded in the work that they do in the classroom. It's a TEKS, check the box. We did that. We did handwriting that day, but it's not ongoing.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when you and I were in school.
Mr. Maynard, I want to make sure, did you have any other questions, Mr.
Yeah,
Maynard?
and then let me just end with a comment, and then I think other people, we need to move on. But, and by the way, is that, the folks that were the pioneers in the American vocational education movement, they were all classically educated, all of them. And again, is that, when we do CTE properly, and it's proper, and I think we may be talking past each other, because I think you and I, we may be actually talking about way different things, okay? But when it's done properly, it supports everything that you're advocating for. I mean, it supports the academic curriculum because it's supposed to. It's supposed to do that. And if it's not, we need to step back and say, well, why is it not? And because all of those academic skills that we need to do, they really come to life when you put them in the context of application. And there was a whole program in East Texas where kids were remediated in ag shops because they couldn't do math. And they took them out, the ag teachers and the math teachers collaborated, and they could teach math in an ag shop because kids could get it. You want to teach the Pythagoras theorem, we're gonna frame rafters.
You're talking about more hands-on where they learn as they are doing.
Absolutely, that's what we're talking about.
Well,
Sure,
we're not
but
opposed to vocational
We're not, and I
schools.
think that's what
Right.
people are not hearing. It's that we have a crisis, and we need to focus on the crisis rather than saying, we need more of this, more of this, more of this, and that all seems to be centered towards workforce training.
Any further
Right.
follow-up questions, Mr. Maynard?
I don't-
Okay. Members, any other questions for the testifiers? Ms. Perez-Diaz.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a couple of questions, actually. So, ma'am, I think you mentioned you have 5 children. So I kind of want to put it into perspective. Do your 5 children learn the same way? Do you see them learning the same way?
No, that's why I love teachers and human interaction.
Understood. That's great. Curriculum, when implemented, when innovated for different kinds of learners, helps students succeed. And so I think where I'm trying to understand, because I hear you saying that, you know, the data supports it, like, we're not succeeding, that we're failing left and right. Do you have any specific data that directly shows the correlation between CTE programming and that failure? Or perhaps could there be other factors like lack of resource or access to resources that are impacting that as well? Because, and I asked that question, please keep that question because I'd like to hear your answer. But attached to that, have you ever visited a career and technical education program in a sprawling urban community? Either one of you, whoever would like to answer.
We have paid for with bond dollars in, say, Lake Highlands High School, where my kids went, and we have a full CTE wing. So yes, I personally have seen it, but I think there's not just the CTE and the career focus and the workforce focus, but also what she had mentioned as technology, learning on a device, and then focusing on social emotional learning. So it isn't just that, no. Absolutely, it's not just that.
Okay.
It's just one of many distractions that take away from academic focus.
So, which brings me to the next question. So, do you consider social and emotional learning and technology distractions from education?
Absolutely, yes. Because I think teachers organically do that, and they've done that for hundreds of years. So what we're seeing is a more corporate model of social emotional learning, and there's actually contracts and vendors who come in and make money off the SEL, and they're scoring the as she mentioned, the government the character traits done through the schools. So yeah, there's that too.
Are we talking about SEL or are we talking about?
I'm still asking some questions. So,
She's not talking to you.
and I appreciate that. I can see some of that. There are also very organic models of those sorts of programming. But I would ask that you take a look at what's happening in my own district in the southwest side of San Antonio. We have the port, the tech port at Boeing. It is a former Air Force base, now converted into, just this hub for STEM education, for science and technology. In the middle of our low-income part of San Antonio, one of our lowest-income parts of San Antonio, we have young people going through these career and technical education programs that are getting admitted to MIT on full rides. Please, I would ask that.
But are they older? Like, how old are the kids that are going through the program?
They start in middle school. In Edgewood ISD, they have a STEM education program beginning in 6th grade. They carry this program into high school, and these kids are leaving with, 6-figure salaries, some of them, because they have these opportunities. And for communities like in Edgewood ISD, this doesn't just mean growth and progress for our young people. It means breaking cycles sometimes of poverty for their families. So I think that when we speak against opportunities that career and technical education programs offer, we have to think about all of our communities. And I would just ask that you take a look at the southwest side of San Antonio.
I would love it if you would share that data that shows the success and the percentage of kids that are graduating and getting into those schools. I'd love to see the data that shows the percentage of children graduating, getting 6 figures out of high school. I would really be interested in that.
Please take a look at Techport at Boeing.
Techport
at Boeing.
Or if you have the data, I'll email you and you can have my contact.
Yeah, I don't have that data. You can take a look. You can research it through Techport at Boeing.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Any
and
any others who hasn't asked a question for the first time?
I have a question for Ms. Davenport. I think we all agree that CTE courses are very beneficial to students, absolutely without a doubt. But my question is, balance is key. So what does give us a scenario of what the most balanced education would look like to incorporate CTE, and at what age do you think it would not hinder the academic performance?
That's a great question. As I had mentioned, as I had mentioned before, that I've been working with unemployed people, and that's from hourly all the way to C-level executives for the last 12 years. So I've seen all kinds of issues that come out of the public schools and the community colleges. I would say, so for example, in 8th, let's see, we have middle school is 7th and 8th grade in Richardson ISD. So they have a course or a program where they raise the ceiling. They expose the students to different types of careers. I think that's beneficial. But that's also the age when I was learning to, I had the grammar lessons and the deep language arts lessons. And so where it gets dangerous is if you focus too much on the careers, those things that can change on a dime. By the time they get out of school, those careers might not even exist, or they've gone a different direction. So if they're not getting that grammatical, the book reports, the deeper understanding of language and being able to write, like I know Ms. Perez Diaz, you said about the tech port. So the best STEM workers not only have the basic science and technology and math skills or engineering, whatever that is, whichever area that is, but they have a more liberal arts, and they're able to communicate their findings as scientists or mathematicians. So the two go hand in hand, and you can't really isolate that into a narrow skill for a child. Much like if you have a child who shows promise as a pitcher, you wouldn't stick them on the pitching mound for years and years and years, and then they wear out that arm. By the time they're an adult, they're not really going to be any good as a pitcher because they've been burned out. So I think with children, we have to be very careful. And to answer your question on the balance, I'm not an educator. I'm just sounding the alarms on what the problems are, and I can see where the problems started. And so if we could shift back, swing that pendulum back to an academic focus, by all means, you don't have to eliminate career technical and the workforce model. It's just keep our eye on the most important thing. Then they can go on to do many other things if they're educated.
Ms. Burks, did you have any follow-up questions? Okay. Any other questions from members? Not seeing any, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Appreciate the dialogue.